Gonna have to take a moment before I open that up now. Good morning, good morning. Getting every last thing set up here. Getting all my buttons configured correctly. Setting exactly how I want it set. There we go. I did have a thought for people who have hard time hearing me. I could change my noise gate and drown all that out. And I don't know. I don't. I'm not a big fan of that. I don't want to have to make it sound awful to make it sound you know for the only people who can't hear me. Okay. Because my voice is my voice. It is what makes me me, and that's just how I have to be. I can't do all these changes just for that. That doesn't feel right for me. It doesn't feel honest. There we go. Check 1 2 1 2. A little sing song for you guys today while I get every last thing set up. I'm gonna make this. Where's my roots? Very fast. Because I don't want it to hold any longer than it really has to. And then hopefully my gates will close very quickly. That's the one thing I don't like about this board. My other board, I could set how long I wanted my gate to sit. It's opened. And on this one, unfortunately, I can't. Let me check the software real quick. See if I can't change that. Here. There's gate, release time. I've got a patch release here. Let's try. We're going to make the release pretty quick, and we're going to make the whole time a little shorter. Honestly, don't even like here. I want to make sure that, yeah, because I see it on here. I just don't know that I'm. Check 1 2. Can everybody hear me okay? I think it's got to be. So I'm putting the window for the stream in the background so that the chat window will be visible. Should be. You guys will see part of the other stuff, but that's fine. I mean, it's really all it's consequential right here is just what you're seeing. So that actually looks pretty good. We're gonna shrink you down. Discord is up and running. Everything's good to go there. Up to go. All right. Before I dig too much into that, there's a couple things I want to talk to some Moody, I think is her name. Yes. All right. So Isabella Moody. Wish me luck. I knocked it over, setting everything up. A little taste of the sun this morning with sun drop. For those of you guys who've never had a sun drop in your life, I highly recommend getting one and opening it and drinking that shit today. Unless you're not a soda drinker, in which case, stay healthy, my friends. Oh yeah, that's a taste of Shawnee, Wisconsin, right there for you. Brings me back, middle school, back when we had the sun drop can machine in Franklin Middle School. That's since been demolished. But man, getting those for 35 cents after school, that was a highlight. All right, so starting off this morning, I wanted to talk about a couple different things today. One of them is these rancid, uh, for better or worse, alt-right influencers. These young women who are, uh, I'm assuming they're using their looks to be part of how they get their base. Maybe not. Maybe they're just relying on their absolutely terrible personality and natures. If that's the case, then the people who are there we go, getting up there in the line correctly. Yeah, if people are watching these people just because of how awful they are, then I would hope that maybe we can, I don't know, just checking a few settings. I guess it's distressing for me because I don't understand why we would allow people like this to have to have this kind of influence and to spread such messages of hate. Is what they are. They're just absolutely hateful messages, and I don't know why we need to be so hateful. It's it's sad to me that we have people like this out there. But what these women are doing, they're see, go to that's a weird way to just shows the videos. We'll use that one, and we'll see what this one is for. Yeah. So yeah, I've never even clicked on this video before.
Fire
I
up the barbecue.
I had no idea what this guy's thing was going to be. But from everything I have seen from this girl, that is 100% on brand for her. Um, she's absolutely terrible about. She thinks women should have the right to vote. She thinks that they should defer to their husbands in all things. Um, she's openly racist. She's openly homophobic. Anything that's liberal whatsoever is just gay. I mean, this sounds like my friends when I was like 12 and they thought they were being super cool and super edgy by saying this crap. Only now it's somebody on the internet who's definitely not 12, definitely should know better. And it, she's a mega influencer with so many followers. It's frightening that people are following people like this and like this exists. Like how does this exist in our society? I thought we were beyond all of this. I thought we were um I don't know, I guess I hoped that we were becoming much more intelligent people. And unfortunately, I guess we're not. Um Almost all of her content is exactly like that. In her defense, is almost always it's just a joke. It's just a joke. I think it's funny. If you think things like that are funny, it's not a joke anymore. It's a part of your personality, and it's an awful part of your personality. It says a lot about who you are and what you believe, and that you think taking somebody else's life in your hands and telling other people it's okay to be awful to them is okay. That's just everything about you that for me I need to know. I don't want to be hanging around or associated with anybody who thinks it's funny to be derogatory or use hate speech about other people just because they belong to a different class of people. Like, what the hell is wrong with people that is where we think it's okay? Um, like, and who's the other one I just saw today? Mally Mouse. Um, just another very similar person like that. She's been kicked off of platforms, has alt accounts on them, and she became popular through making racist and homophobic comments about Disney, where it's just all she's doing is, you know, calling everything Disney racist. Any like okay, let let's jump on the whole. um, Disney. We'll talk about MCU real quick. We'll talk about Disney making live actions with people who are of different races in different roles that were not that race, maybe in the cartoon version. Um, yeah, it should be a real short conversation because it's kind of fucking stupid, honestly. To be 100% real with you. Um, I want to move this over for myself real quick. Um, Disney has been making live actions, and they have been taking characters that were in these live actions, and they've been taking them and giving them to whoever does the role really well. Um, if you see all the people who did casting calls for them, you see that there's people of any shape, size, color, whatever. Um, and to Disney's credit, it doesn't seem like, from what I've seen, that they're explicitly looking for people of a race or color or something. They don't have like an agenda going into this. They're basically saying whoever does the best in these tryouts gets the role irregardless. I'm sorry, regardless. It's a whole habit, man. It's hard to break that one. So yeah, it's not that Disney's going, um, sorry, James, you are fantastic, but we're looking explicitly to hire somebody who is black or who is Latin or who is whatever or Chinese or whatever the case may be, just to get that person into that role because we're going woke, James. We're going woke, and I'm sorry, you were fantastic. You're better than everybody else, but we need to be woke on this one. That's absolutely not what's happening with Disney. And anybody who thinks that is absolutely allowing themselves to be led around like a cow with one of them rings in its nose. Um, yeah, be better than that. Be smarter than that. It's not hard to go look at the casting. A lot of that stuff can be found online. They're finding the people who absolutely are fantastic in these roles, um, and they think that person is going to do a really good job and that it's going to be widely accepted because of how good they are doing. Um, and the fact that people are focusing more on the skin tone of a person than the ability to execute that character is it blows my mind, honestly. Like, you know, Martin Luther King gave the speech so long ago and talked about the content of a person's character and their skills being so much more important than the color of their skin. And sadly, 60 years later, we still can't get it through our fucking heads that uh that that's important, that it's relevant, that we can't focus on things that are just not relevant to who the person is, um or the job that they're doing. uh Trying to say everything is DEI or woke or whatever just because somebody's black or Mexican or Chinese or Brazilian or whatever the case may be is just dumb. Like, how many times have you tried to go, well, they hired that white person because they're Russian, um, or they hired that white person because they're French. You're not belittling a choice on white people because of where the white person is from. You're not looking at it that way. So the fact that you're trying to say it's because of skin color is just absolutely freaking stupid. It really is. And so all these little racist and awful TikTokers on the outright, like, holy Christ! If you are watching these people and um copying and pasting them, sharing them, using them as any kind of basis on which to formulate your beliefs or which to or you're repeating what they say, you're repeating it, you're putting it back out there, you're giving it more of a platform. Holy crap, think about what you're doing. I want you to really, really, really think about the platform of hate that you're putting out there, because most of the people I know, um they're not hateful people, at least not openly with me. I'm very much led to believe that the vast majority of the people that I know are not hateful people. They're good-hearted people. They really, really want great things. Good morning, Spink. Kids are at school and she's all lost. Um, it's nuts to try to, one, that people can literally make platforms where it's all about hate, and they're literally not just making a living off of it, they're making a very, very healthy living off of it. And because they're also pretty on top of it, they're able to do all this fashionista crap and sell all this merchandise on the side. And you get these alpha dogs over there slobbering all over themselves, just clicking on all these pretty girls being absolutely fucking horrible human beings. Um, yeah, and whether or not they actually believe what they're saying, I don't know, but they are more than happy to put this out there and to make a living off of selling hatred, off of selling a message that will absolutely spread and impact so many lives out there. You're going to have people um, getting racist comments hurled at them. You're going to have people having hate slung at them who are going to inevitably be potentially physically abused, maybe worse, because they all these people are hearing these absolutely awful messages and they're going, well, it's okay because this person said it was. And since they said it was, I can absolutely do that. I can absolutely go into that, and we can we can be this awful person because it's okay. Um, why? Why are we allowing this? Why are we promoting any of this nonsense at all? We know better than this. We know so much better than this, and we are just absolutely um okay with this. Like who is okay with this out there? Who out there is like, you know what? Uh, this is absolutely awful, but I'm gonna go with it. I'm gonna let this one hang. Like I can't believe that there's people out there who. Hold on, I'm adjusting some things real quick. Just trying to get rid of it all after I speak. I can't get my gates to close faster on here. I don't know if it's coming through the stream itself. I just hear it through my monitoring headphones here, and maybe I shouldn't be using that. Maybe I should be using the one through here. But we'll figure it out later. But yeah, I mean the hate that we are literally making. We're giving people the opportunity to make a livelihood off of fucking hate and anger and selling a message out there that most of us raised our kids telling them that this is not okay. Our churches hopefully are telling you this isn't okay. We may not agree with somebody's lifestyle choices, but we don't go out there openly and assault people and attack people and tell everybody that it's okay and repeat that message. Not only that it's okay for you to go out there and assault and attack people, but that other people should also go out there and assault and attack people. Like, holy Christ on a cracker, man. This is not who we are. We are a better people than this. We are a better society. So if you have friends who are posting this kind of stuff, and maybe they don't know that this is that creators all their content. Maybe they just saw one online and shared it from whatever source they saw it. Maybe that's what's going on. I don't know. Man, but I don't know. I guess call them out. Call them out. Don't be. You don't have to be an asshole about it necessarily. I'm not saying that, but call them out and let them know, hey, man, um, this is just not okay. This is not. You're a buddy of mine. You're a friend of mine. I don't think you understand what this message is, what this person's saying. I'm hoping maybe that you don't. Maybe you absolutely do, but I hope that you don't. And I want to call you out enough to let you know that absolutely these are awful messages, and I want you to openly acknowledge that this is not what you believe, and that you want to be a better person. You know, um, I think it's time we step up a little bit on our game and let people know that we're gonna hold them to account. We're gonna call them out. We're gonna say, hey man, if this is really what you believe, if this is really who you are, then this is how I see you. Because this isn't acceptable. this isn't this isn't what I would call a good person, let alone a friend. So yeah, that Mally Mouse, Bella Moody or Isabella Moody, whatever the heck she wants to go by, depending on the platform. Both of them have been kicked off of platforms in the past. No doubt with hate speech, they will likely get kicked off again. Um, and for anybody out there, because I'm hearing it in my head already somehow, like I'm hearing people's little voices pop in my head from through the ether, going, "But we have free speech," and the idea that we can be kicked off of platforms because of what we say is that's not free speech. That absolutely is free speech. Free speech does not give you the authority or right to say whatever you want without consequence. It allows you to say whatever you want without the government itself putting you in fucking prison because you spoke out against the government. That's what free speech is. It protects you from the government. No other, for the most part, almost no other country in the world has that. There's a handful of other democracies now that have it, but there's huge portions of the world that do not have that freedom. They cannot speak out against their government in print. They cannot speak out against their government in voice. If they are heard to be doing so, they can be arrested and put in prison for the rest of their natural fucking lives. In America, that cannot happen to you. But that does not mean you can use hate speech or any other awful speech and expect that other people or your bosses or your schools will not absolutely hold you to account for being an awful fucking person. Um, they absolutely should. If you go to work and you're using hate speech at work, they can absolutely do that. If you work in a position of public relations and they find out that at home you're using hate speech, and they go, well, since this person represents us as a company and they signed this paper that said that they would not do this on their off time or in any kind of public venue as a representative of our company, and they are absolutely doing so, they can fire you for that. I'm a county board member. If I use hate speech, even in my personal life, it wouldn't matter if it was my own personal account because I represent the people of my county and the county board itself as a government entity. So if I started using hate speech and stuff, I would absolutely be dismissed because that's not okay. I represent people. And anytime we do stuff, like technically all of you represent people to some greater or lesser degree. When you do things, you represent like the people that okay, so like the neighborhood that you live in, you're representative of that. The culture of whatever culture you belong to, be it a Christian culture, be it a maybe you're from the South, so you represent Southern culture in your area. You represent all these different groups based on how people see you and who you associate with. You're represented if you have a bunch of friends. Now, whatever you say is representative of your friends, which is why I always say, hey, call your friends out when they are doing crazy shit or saying crazy shit, because that also represents you. You can absolutely not believe something your friend does, but as long as you're with your friend and you're still friends with somebody who's doing all of that stuff, people are naturally going to assume he says he doesn't approve of it, but he certainly seems to be okay with all of the people who are doing all of that stuff. So yeah, absolutely. It should be called out. People should be looking at you and going, "Well, that's not okay." But he's always with the guy. The guy's always doing all of this racist and horrible stuff. And I don't know. I'm not saying he's necessarily the racist guy openly, but maybe he's the closeted racist guy because he's always okay with it. He's always allowing it to go through. So, there is that, and it's not illegitimate to think about it that way. So, think about it. You need to be the one to think about it. If it's your friend that's doing that stuff, think about it. If it's you who's carrying this stuff and that's not what your intent was, you didn't know how bad it was. Hopefully, open your friggin' eyes and take a moment to think about that. Take a moment to acknowledge that if you share hate messages or messages of hate, as it were, that people are going to assume that you also have that hatred in your heart and that that's who you are, and maybe it's not. maybe the hate speech is not who you are, but it's the message that you're sending out there. And yeah, I didn't know. Oh man, just trying to. I'm a sound engineer by heart, so anytime I hear something like that in the background, that little after I'm done and I know exactly how I could fix it on my other board, but I can't fix it from this, drives me crazy. But yeah, it meant be better, I guess. Um, I'm not saying be best. I'm not saying don't make mistakes, but be aware. Especially be aware of when you make mistakes. If you're making a mistake, um, and somebody calls you out, don't jump on the defense right away and try to defend yourself. If all they're really saying is, "Hey, man, this is some questionable stuff." I don't know if you realized how questionable it was. They're not necessarily attacking you. They're most likely not attacking you. What they're doing is saying, "Hey, I think you knee jerk shared this. I don't think you fully understood what was all going on in this." And I've done this with people in the past, in the recent past, as a matter of fact, because I do this quite a bit. And people will absolutely, most of the time, just be like, wait, what? And then they'll go back and they'll check it out and they're like, oh, crap. Because they didn't realize what it was. They didn't realize that what they thought was just a simple message about, um, you know, since we're on the Disney thing, that it was just a thing about a Disney character and that it was they were like, oh, I was talking about this woke thing, and I'm just tired of hearing about woke stuff and these DEI hires or whatever, and they don't know the full story. Number one, behind it, they don't understand that that's not what that is. Um, like let's say for Marvel with some of the new female heroes coming out or the transitions from males to the female counterparts. There's so many people who are like, "Oh, this is woke culture," what they don't know is that in the fucking comics, that's actually the storyline. That's actually what happened. Some of it had to be accelerated because Chad passed away far too early. What a great actor he was, but um, in the comics, yeah, you know, there's a female Black Panther who transitions through his family. So it's not something that didn't happen in the comics. And a lot of these, there's female Iron Man that comes later in the comics. There's other female superheroes that come out later in the comics that inherit the reins. She Hulk came out later in the fucking comics and was wildly popular. She didn't replace the Hulk. She was just another freaking Hulk that was out there. Um, so people who are they don't know all this because they didn't read the comics. They were never invested in the comics. Um, it, I don't care that people didn't know this. What I care about is that people's reaction to it is immediately, essentially, very, very sexist, and they're trying to like claim everything is some political woke agenda when it's absolutely not. Um, I I think truth is ultimately something that is so important, and for people to come along and say, "Hey, um, I don't care. I just, you know, I think it's awful that there's a female hero in this, and that bores me because, like, why? Why would a female hero bore you? Um, like, I just personally, I just like a great story. I don't care if it's a male hero or a female hero. Um, I get all the underlying messages, but on top of it all, I just really want to be entertained, and the messages can come after the fact. But most of these things that we're talking about within the Marvel Cinematic Universe, they're not underlying messages for the most part. They're literally things that happened in the actual comic books, and they're just being brought to the screen now. Um, like I if you didn't read the comics, you don't know about the comics, and you don't want to go like sit there and Google every single time something changes. I get that, it's a lot, but I need you to understand that it's not a woke agenda, it's not a DEI agenda, it's nothing like that. It's literally just following the goddamn stories that are in the comic books. Um, Maybe you were never a geek and the comics were just never your thing. That's cool, but then you have to understand that these movies, they're our thing. we are the intended audience for them. You guys who enjoy them as well are just kind of like a you're the side chick in this story. Um, nope, it wasn't necessarily intended for you. You're free to enjoy it, but ultimately, your opinions on a lot of it aren't as relevant because you're not the intended audience. And I'm not saying you can't enjoy it, but I am saying that it's like going to an art museum or an art style that you were just never a fan of. And then you're like, well, here's my opinions about why this is crap. Well, given the artist there is obviously the artist, and this is his medium, this is how he conveys his art. And most of the other people there are probably people who appreciate that style of art and came there because they have an appreciation for that style of art. And you're going to give an uninformed opinion about something you don't like, and you really didn't spend much of your life cultivating. So you don't really have a foot to stand on, so to speak, or a leg to stand on. Nobody cares what your opinion is if this is something you are so poorly informed on, and you really shouldn't have an opinion. You can say, I still just don't get this kind of art. I still don't like this kind of art. That would be about as far as it can go. But ultimately, you don't really, this isn't the place for you then. And that's fine. If you do see couple pieces of art you like, maybe that's what you should focus on is the ones that you do like, and stop focusing on the ones you don't get, the things you don't understand. And go, hey, I don't have to like every single piece of impressionist art. There could be 25 artists that I hate, but there's one or two artists that I really enjoy their impressionist art, the way that they interpret things, the way that they paint. But I don't. You can like them and not like everybody else, but that doesn't make your opinion on everybody else necessarily valid. It just means you don't like them, you don't get it. That's cool. Same thing with music. If you don't like an artist, don't listen to them. Just because you don't like somebody's music doesn't mean that your opinion is suddenly the most important one or correct. It just means that maybe you don't get it, maybe it doesn't connect with you, and that's fine. Not everything is supposed to connect with everybody. Art, in any sense, is always geared to connect with anybody who connects with it, and anybody who doesn't. All right, that's cool. Maybe it's unfortunate that these people don't have that same connection, but it's not supposed to. It's supposed to connect only with who resonates with it. If you have tuning forks and you hit one, and the other tuning fork is at the same resonant frequency, they're both going to vibrate. You just put it close together, and that resonant frequency is going to pick up on the other one, and it's going to vibrate. Right? I don't know if you guys know anything about science, but resonant frequencies, tuning forks, yeah. Smack one, if the other one's tuned to the same frequency, and you put it close, they will both vibrate. But if you're not the same frequency as that other tuning fork, it can be hit as hard as it wants to be, and you're going to put it close, and it's just not going to pick up the resonance. It's not going to pick up the vibration. That doesn't mean it's not also a valid tuning fork. It just means that it's not tuned to that same frequency, and that's cool. Human beings are like that for me. I've always thought of people as like this great chorus of music. Every single one of us is a portion of this great choir. And to be a great choir, we have to all have our own unique frequencies. So we can't all resonate off of everything. Every single one of us is going to have things that we resonate with and things that we don't. And that's cool. That's what makes a choir sound so beautiful, is that we all have our things. We all have our places to be in that great choir. So we have to then get to that point where we just understand and acknowledge that it's okay to not be that person or that thing or whatever. And we have to acknowledge that it's okay to not like certain things or to not get certain things, but that our opinion on it is fundamentally not relevant to that. It doesn't invalidate that. It doesn't take away from that. And it existing and us not getting it doesn't take away from us. It doesn't make us less not get something. If you don't like a certain kind of music, that doesn't mean you are less than because you just don't get that kind of music. Absolutely does not have any bearing on that. If that makes sense, right? Like it's okay to just disagree sometimes, but it is not okay to spread a message of hate. All right. Next thing I want to touch on, and this one should be a little faster, a little easier, is birth rate. Um, I'm talking about the rate of birth is going down, right? For those who don't know, uh, people have been having less babies. This has been going on for a couple of years now. This is not a new thing at all. It's like the last 10, 15 years. Um, the rate of birth has been kind of declining for a good while, not just recently. And what does that mean in the long term? A lot of good and a lot of bad things. I think most of us who know anything about anything really, we all know about boomers. Um, if you know about why they're called boomers, then you kind of understand where I'm going with this probably already. Boomers are boomers because of when they were born, and now the soldiers coming back from the war at the time was that World War II, I believe. Um, they were all coming back, and everybody was so excited to see them home that they made oodles and oodles of babies, effectively. Not all at once, obviously. Over time, after all, boomers are an entire generation. So, um, these guys were happy to be home. They got back from all these atrocities of war and things that honestly most people should never have to see, and thankfully most people never to see, but they did, and part of dealing with that may have been just making more babies and trying to celebrate life, and for better or worse, that's not a bad way to do it. Um, but then that's why you have the boomer generation. That's why you have this explosion of population. And that drove so many things during that time period. It drove a lot of success in the industry because there was so many more babies. You have to obviously take care of all of those babies. You have to provide the infrastructure to educate the children and to, you know, you can make more factories and stuff because you're going to have this explosion of workers. So like if you follow the boomers and you follow anything as far as like um, how economics and infrastructure and everything developed along with the boomers, you'll see that there was a kind of an explosion uh, across the board in the country that was, I guess, was similar to like the industrial revolution kind of jump, really, in its own way, because while machinery in the industrial revolution and the way that factories were then developed led to the boom there. People are very much like machines on their own. So having a huge surplus of workers and people in society and consumers then makes everything shift again. Um, so that was kind of a second, not quite industrial revolution, but very similar in the aspects of how it affected the economy. Well, obviously, not everybody's going to war. The same um, compromises of individualism that incited the baby boomers, the same um, you know emotional and sociological aspects that were there that created the boomers. They weren't there in any follow-up generation. Even with the few wars that we had, they were just nowhere near to that degree. There was no world war kind of things. Nothing ever reached that again, and we just have not had um, that birth rate continue, which sociologically I think is actually great. Um, economically, it's harder because you have less workers out there, you have less consumers out there, and anybody who knows much about economics knows that less consumers and less workers means that it's going to affect your bottom line in revenue, and that's going to affect your stock market because stocks are based. The value of stocks is based on your revenues, how much money your business is making in the. If your revenues are going down, that means your stock is underperforming where you want it to be. And while as a business, as long as you're still making an overall profit, uh, a net profit after all of your new investments and everything like that, because that's where that comes from, is you have your profit and then you reinvest a portion of your profit into all your future projects. And after all of that, that's when you get your revenue. So these places are making billions and billions of dollars still in profit, but because they made less than projections or they made less than they did last quarter in profit, even though they're still wildly profitable, their little chart went, was going like this, but then it went like this, and it's still going up, just not as much. Well, people are going, well, do I really want to keep my money with them because it's not, going up to that same increase that I really wanted to see. I was hoping for at least a 45% growth over the quarter. I only got 15% growth over the quarter. Maybe I pull my money. Well, you pull your money out of a business, sell your stock, or trade it for a different stock, whatever the case. Obviously, if you're trading it, you're selling it to buy a different stock. Uh, Whatever your thought process is on that impacts that. It's going to impact that company's bottom line because the more people who sell that stock, the less the stock is valued. The less the stock is valued, the less it's traded. And if everybody's trying to sell off that stock, it becomes basically worthless, and then companies can be shuttered just because of that. Even if they were still making an actual profit, an and a good one, just because the stocks didn't perform as well, it can actually be a death of a company. And that's the wild thing. And that's where the whole um, less consumers out there, less workers out there is being impactful. One, the less workers you have out there, the workers are a commodity just like anything else. We're something that fits into a supply and demand kind of mold where if there's less workers and businesses have to have us to get their stuff taken care of, then the value of the worker goes up, meaning wages should go up as well. Now, that didn't happen for a long time because there were still enough workers to always go, well, I don't really care if you want to leave Tommy because we're going to just hire, Timmy because he wants to work and he doesn't mind taking that wage. So you could be demanding of that wage, but your value just wasn't there because you're easy to replace and the job was easy enough to train somebody into. Um, the little bit of loss was not going to impact the company anywhere near as much as just replacing somebody. So it was okay for them to constantly just have these people, these workers that just constantly cycle through. It was okay to have turnover rates. Um, Companies will always say that they don't want turnover rates because it makes them look bad, but honestly, they don't care. They 100% do not give a shit about what their turnover rate is, other than minor inconvenience. As long as they're still making money, they will always have a turnover rate. Their ideal turnover rate consists of turning over people at the longer term employment and having shorter term employees in that respect. That's because the longer you're there, the more benefits that they will pay to you, the more money you are inevitably making per hour, and the more bonuses and other things that are likely to be levied on your wages. So if they can get rid of people who've been there for a longer time and get more short-term employees in there, they're fine with that as long as the job can get done effectively. There is a minimal number of people they want there for a long period of time. They will absolutely still try to keep people there for a long time, but they want only a handful of those people because you can conduct your business well with a handful of people that have been there for a long time and you thrive on constant turnover on the bottom. But the thing with the birth rate going lower is that becomes less and less and less of an option because workers just there's not going to be as many of them coming up. And what's funny is with the birth rate going down, is you're seeing businesses, you're seeing governments begging people to have babies. Um, it's kind of crazy because I never thought I would live in a time when they're offering to pay people to go and have children, um, entirely for the prospect of the economy, essentially. And they're willing to pay. Different countries are spending huge amounts of money to people. Well, I see it as huge. Most of us, I think, would see it as a pretty sizable sum of money to move there and to have children, um, because it's highly profitable to have more children. Because I don't know if for anybody who's ever not had a kid, having kids, taking care of them, raising them, That's super expensive. You're buying diapers, you're buying formula, you're buying food, you're buying toys. It's a very big investment. It's why families get tax credits because they're already spending so much money out there in sales tax and everything else. They're making that money. Your county's making whatever percent it makes off all of that revenue. Your state's making all of that money off of that revenue, and those are offsetting any kind of benefit programs that the federal government is doing. That's why you get the tax credit. Trust me, it works out when you're doing all of the money in that aspect. That, that money is very much supporting the rest of the community. You think that these poor people are keeping all this money and putting it into investments? You're absolutely nuts. If you give poor people a tax credit or some kind of fund like food stamps or something, all that money goes immediately back into the local economy. It supports countless freaking jobs. It pays that money when you get the taxes spent on it at or whatever food or whatever. Any taxes that are on that still go to the state and to the county. So all of that money still goes to help pay for like your road programs and your taxes that take care of all everything within your community. So those are really, really lucrative programs, and they really help your local economy far more than you would ever imagine. So don't hate those programs. Understand them and why all of that money needs to be out there. Um, assistance programs are really good for that. But the birth rate, yeah, I can jump into so many different things so fast. Um, anybody wants to ever talk about some of that stuff, feel free to let me know. We'll dive into how those programs work and how all that money can really bolster your local economies and such. But the birth rates going down is so indicative of a change in our culture and society. Like people don't want to have kids just to have kids. Um, it should be something you really really want in your life, like an asshole cat that just knocks everything off the shelves. You really really have to want that cat because there are times when you really really don't. But cat you can give away, you can take care of it, put it out in the woods, whatever. You can't do that with your baby. I've tried. No, I'm kidding. I but no, once you have a child, obviously you're bound to it. You're going to take care of it. It's going to change everything about your life. Goals you may have had get put off. Um, you may have you may not have the ability to attain certain dreams that you once had, or you have to put them off for a period of time to properly take care of your baby. It's life altering. And a lot of people now don't want to jump into something that's life altering, especially when they're not finding the same relationships that we used to have. We used to be able to find relationships pretty easy, but you can get into a good relationship much easier you know back 20, 30 years ago because we were more social creatures. We met each other physically face to face, and um, we had these very fostered relationships that we were able to grow organically. Nowadays, online, it's so much harder to have those relationships and to build those relationships because I mean, when you really look at it, these are things where online you're just people are putting on all these fronts. They're being so fake about a lot of who they are all of the time. They're trying to be popular with their communities. They're more interested in likes and social credit than they are in developing organic relationships that are just based on yes, I'm a human being. Yeah, I fart in bed when I'm sleeping because it's okay. I make mistakes, whatever the case may be. There's so little incentive to just be an authentic and real individual anymore, and it's all about putting out these concepts of who you are, how cool you are, how much social credit you deserve, and how great you could be, and all of this other stuff. And it's hard to want to be in relationships because if that's what you're going for, if that's who you dive into, is this person that you see online, and then you go and you start hanging out in real life, well, that's when the organic part comes in, and you realize that this isn't who this is. So you get disenchanted at the beginning of the relationship, which that's not a good thing. You should be married at least 2 to 3 years before you're really disenchanted with somebody. uh, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. But to a degree, I'm not like when you're married, you really find out who people are when you're living with them for a very long time, and you find out all the things that drive you friggin' nuts. But and that's fine then at that point because you lived with that person long enough to know about all the great things about that person. So you figure out how you're going to navigate those waters. So what makes you crazy and what you're willing to live with, and that's okay. Um, you know, you find your way through all of that together. When you're just getting into a relationship with somebody, that's much harder because if you're just getting into a relationship with that person and you get disenfranchised or disenchanted right away with that person, you feel like I don't have an investment here. I don't really know this person that well. I feel like I've maybe been sold a bad bill of sale. Um, whatever the case may be, it's harder to feel like you should stick it out and try to get to know this person. It's really easy to dip out of it. So culturally, we just don't have that same, um, you know, um, I did bring my freaking inhaler up here. I'm struggling with the breath a little, but we don't have that same kind of environment that fosters that anymore. We are not that same kind of culture that bred that kind of organic relationship. So relationships aren't the same as they were before. Everybody posts about how they want to be loved, but how can you be loved when your whole aspect is reaching out to be loved? Um, where's the rest of the personality? Where's the rest of the person? People don't want to reach out to love somebody else without feeling like that person may be looking to love somebody. And the entire relationship, of course, can't just be about needing and wanting or needing and giving. There has to be so much more into that relationship, so much more meat and substance to that relationship for it to ever grow and mature into something more. Um, so, authentic human uh, really needs to become a bigger portion of things online, and unfortunately, it just isn't right now. You're not seeing a lot of those relationships get built and cultivated. You do see a lot of relationships that quick start and then quick evaporate. Because like I said, people are investing into a character, and they're quickly finding out that that's not who that person is, and it's not the relationship that they want to be a part of. Um, and sometimes it's mutual, sometimes it's not, unfortunately. And then, of course, there's the notion that everybody, well, not everybody, but a lot of people out there, they just want people who essentially are going to become their real life likes and real life hearts. And they're going to constantly get that attention from that person. And, they're going to be like, everything you do, like, click, Um, and that's not who people are. People have to have their own times. They need to have their own space. They need to have their own identities on top of, that relationship. And unfortunately, that's not mentality that the internet breeds. The internet breeds this very self-serving idea about who things are, and that everything should kind of be towards you, clicking, liking, and just worshiping who that person is. And that's not going to help out. So, of course, you're going to see decline in birth rates as technology is increased, and it has nothing to do with the fact that there's things like porn out there or something stupid like that. I've heard that conjecture. I really don't think that that's a big play into it. I don't think porn has helped people in their sexual relationships, but I do think that it's not a real big factor in people's actual normal relationships, developing, boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever the case may be, you with your potential partner's relationship. I think it's just disingenuous to pretend that um, people are really just not um, connecting on that level anymore because of something so, you know, for better or worse, really just a thin thing. It's not really intrinsic, it's not important, and it really doesn't influence people to the degree that I think a lot of people think it does. So it might send some wrong messages, but it's not what's crippling the connections between people right now. I think what's crippling connections between people is them not being able to one be cognizant of who they as an individual really are. They're not. I keep telling people if you really want someone to love you, the first thing you have to do is love yourself. Um, That's where that confidence comes from. That's where people will fall in love with you. You fall in love with somebody who's confident. You fall in love with somebody who just seems authentic and who is who they are. And some, for better or worse, it's a very attractive thing for most people because one, if you know somebody really loves himself, um, you don't become a dependency. They don't necessarily rely on you at all times to fill all of them. They don't need you to constantly be there to support them and to love them 24/7, and it can feel suffocating when you're in a relationship with somebody like that. So finding somebody who loves himself enough takes a lot of that weight off. You're like, oh, hey, cool, shit. I don't have to make sure that I'm constantly letting this person know that I love them and that they're the light of my life and everything else because they know they're good with who they are. They're taking care of things. Everything's gonna work out because they're confident and they're so that's a big portion of it. People need to have their own self awareness and they need to like themselves enough that it's not going to suffocate you to be in that relationship with them, and it's not going to require you give up constantly so much of yourself to be in that relationship with them. And unfortunately, our internet today has kind of fostered very much that mentality with a lot of people. So relationships are also a lot about sacrifice, giving up your, things when you maybe don't want to. You're not as big a fan of it. And again, today's modern culture isn't as much about sacrifice. It's about finding the echo chambers, the things that don't disagree with, the things that don't ask of me, the things that give to me or support just my line of thought. And that's why, again, you're not having as many great relationships because if somebody doesn't agree with me on every single thing, I'm just gonna walk away. That's not a good, healthy way to look at into any relationship. My wife and I do agree on a lot of things, but we don't agree on everything by any means. There's a lot of things that we disagree on. But morality, I think, is where the cutoff is for a lot of people, and that one's fine. If you're looking at things and you find out dudes are racist or whatever the case may be, and you're not cool with that because you're not a racist, good for you. Um, that's where you draw the line, and you're like, well, I'm not going to carry on with this relationship. Maybe you're a Christian and that person's a Mormon, and you're like, well, this can't go. I'm not going to join your church. We have different morals, whatever the case may be. It's just not going to work out. That's a decision you have to come to. Um, Morals are where a lot of people will draw the line, and they should, I think, draw the line mostly there because that's going to be a lot of conflict later on for you, and it's very difficult to have a healthy relationship with that kind of conflict. Almost anything else you can get past. But that's I think where the birth rates are starting to really lag. Is that one, we don't have any major conflicts that are bringing people home, and then we're trying to forget. We're trying to work through PTSD. We're trying to work through the nightmares, and we're trying to reaffirm the connections with all that's good in the world by creating a family. Um, that's how we had the boomers, and there's nothing doing that now, and there's nothing wrong with that. Thank fucking God we're not having that issue right now. Um, but we need to recognize that that's what drove that, and not hope for something to also drive that again the same way. That's not healthy, and I don't think it's going to be. I don't think it's what we need. Um, so birth rates are on the decline, and that's going to affect how many consumers are out there, and that's why you're seeing a lot of countries and a lot of businesses try to push for birth rates. Um, they're essentially the same thing. Whether you're just somebody who's paying taxes in these communities, or whether or not you're somebody who's working in the line, bringing in more money for the company. Both these cities, these states, these countries, and these businesses, all of them, they're all looking to try to keep their margins up. They're trying to keep their profits up. Because one of the things that you'll hear a lot if you are in economic circles is that um, you can't have deflation. You can only ever have inflation. Deflation's not good. That's where your recessions happen. That's where, well, here's my thing. I I do agree that with our system, the way it's set up, you will absolutely have, um, recessions. You will absolutely have potentially depressions if you have deflation. But we kind of set up a shit system that is going to have that, and I don't think that inherently deflation is bad. I think that if we had just not had if we had not set up a system that anytime there was any kind of market correction or deflation that it was going to be crippling, I think we would have been all right. But unfortunately, we at the time only ever wanted money to become essentially less valuable because that's what inflation is your dollar becomes less valuable and therefore you need more dollars to buy the same stuff. Some idiot somewhere along the line thought that that would be a better prospect than the dollar ever becoming more valuable. Um, Essentially, all currency in the world is battling for the same exact relationship, which is they will all eventually become less valuable. It's only more important to be more valuable than other people's money, so less valuable than other people's money, if that makes sense. So you're battling against other currencies for a global trade in that regard. Um, but if you become more valuable because of deflation, that means there's negative aspects of the economy locally, and therefore it's such a big stupid thing. Because honestly, what doesn't it make more sense that the dollar becomes more valuable and can buy more things with less dollars? That's essentially what deflation would be. The only downside of it is your stocks are gonna freaking lose their value to a degree because stocks are only worth more because the dollar's worth less, if that makes sense. So if I have, something that's worth one cookie, but a cookie's less yummy now than it used to be, I will now need five cookies for my stock. Um, my stock value went up to five cookies, but does that mean that the cookies are any better? No. It just means that I selfishly want more cookies because I don't think of them as great anymore because the cookies lost value to. Now, if if somebody made a better cookie and suddenly that tasted better and I only wanted one cookie again, people are going, well, now your stock is worth less. It was worth five cookies yesterday. Now it's only worth one cookie. Well, I don't know if I want to keep that stock. Doesn't matter that the cookie's better and worth more now. They just see that it's, these two different numbers. And so people will get rid of my stock because they want more cookies, not better cookies. They don't, it's not about the value. It's about this overall figure. So it's really like the dumbest fucking system. And unfortunately, that's the system we created and tied ourselves to. Anytime that we would deflate the value of the dollar to make it worth more or less, somehow it's a crippling thing. So even though technically the dollar would be worth more and that's better on the world stage, it hurts our stock market, which is so important to our business market that um, it's literally uh, cutting ourselves deep to do the right thing. So that's where that comes from. That's why the birth rates are being looked at so hard. That's why you're always seeing people talk about like we need to cut costs in this business to bring up our margins so that we're making more money because they need the revenue so that the revenue can say that they made more money this quarter again because they need to always make more money every single quarter. Well, here's the thing: if there's less people to buy your product, how do you get more products sold? How do you increase your sales revenue if you don't have as many people out there this quarter, last quarter to buy that product? Uh, so it's a nutty thing, and it's one of the reasons I absolutely detest the stock market. It's one of the reasons why, um, for instance, businesses, even governments, they do the same thing. The military, all these organizations do the same thing, where they spend so much money every single quarter or every year, depending on how they're doing their budgets, and they will say, well, you spent this much last year or last quarter, and we're going to budget you the same amount this quarter, unless you spent less than that. If you saved $10,000 in your department last time, I don't need to spend that $10,000 in the future, right? Because you're able to make it by with 10,000 less last time. Why would I budget to still give you that, that margin when you apparently you don't need it? So all of these departments, all these governments are always trying to spend as much money as possible to justify needing that same amount or that much more. Um, and it's such a bullshit act, really. We should be able to uh, plan better than that, to have revenue that maybe we don't, or to have money that we make but don't spend, and we put into an account and say, hey, um, we didn't need to spend it this year because it made no sense to spend it on shit that we didn't need. Therefore, we can put it into a bank. We can accrue some freaking, uh, interest on it. And in the future, when we want to do a larger project, we have that monies that we saved up over the last couple of years. And now we don't need to punish the taxpayer so much for all of that. But the problem is, you will have people who are taxpayers who say, well, you guys are making a profit on this. Even though it's not a profit, you're just having an account that you're going to use for future investments that are sizable, like schools or whatever the case may be. And they're going to go, well, since you have all this extra money, what you need to do then is just lower our taxes, because if you lower our taxes, it would compensate us for that. And then, but the problem then is in the future, when you do need that money, it wouldn't be there because the taxes wouldn't be enough to cover it. And then you would have to raise taxes at a much more considerable level. Um, so it becomes this argument of um, where do you go with it? Do you lower taxes and then later on have to argue with the taxpayer why you need to raise taxes 5% so that you can make the extra, $100 million to build these facilities that you absolutely need to do and do the repairs that you absolutely should have been fucking doing all along? Or do you just keep the taxes up and budget to spend this money that you absolutely don't need to spend on projects that you absolutely don't need to do to justify keeping the taxes where you need them so that when the projects that you do need to do, you do have the funds to appropriate for that. Um, it's such a juggling act just because people get upset about things that they don't understand, and they're literally hobbling themselves, trying to save as much money in their own pocket. And by all means, I do understand that most people want that money in their own pockets. Most people would be happy with that, but it's to the point where people they'll argue about having to pay for a public sewer system, having to pay for public water treatments, having to pay for public police departments. And I'm like, cool. You don't want to pay for any of these public assets. That's fine. Well, let's say your house catches on fire and the police department has to come there and they have to take care of that fire, and they put it out and they save everything before it gets too out of hand. But now the public didn't pay for you didn't pay for that, so now you have to pay for that privately. Um, so now you're going to spend $10,000 on that versus it just having been something that the public was just taking care of. Somebody was robbing you, you called the police, they stopped the robber, saved everything. Cool. But now that was privatized, so now that's going to cost you, $5,000 for that visit. Um, you know, you want your own water, well, now you're going to have to get a well, and you're going to have your well go down into the water table. That well's going to have to be government. It's going to have to meet government standards because we have to make sure that since you have same access to the water table everybody else does, that you're not doing anything that's going to poison that water table. Uh, so then there's all of that. You have to meet all of those standards. You have to keep your well up to speed. If your well's not deep enough and it's not hitting the water table anymore, you're going to have it redug, and that's all on your own expense. So there's a reason why everything's. Um, but yeah, that's the whole thing with birth rate is that these people, these companies, these businesses, these government entities, um, they're getting less revenue taxes. They're making less money in you know on sales revenue in these businesses, and so it's a huge downside for them. They're trying to figure out how to make up those margins. I personally think that the birth rate should go down for a while, and that there's really nothing to be seen as far as good in that, especially when we're looking at automating so many industries as it is. Make no mistake, there's more and more automation to come. We'll be seeing, especially as AI gets better and mechanics get better, we're going to see far more improvements in automation. And it's going to be something where we really have to start dealing with the morality and the concepts of how many jobs should automation and robots do, and how are we going to continue to pay people, and how much do we pay people, and how do we bolster our economy going forward. That's going to be a whole rigmarole going into the near future here. Um, it's going to be interesting for all of us who are going to be around this deal. Um, so the next thing I want to talk to you guys about is Project 2025. Um, this is the Heritage Project. The Heritage Project Conservative Think Tank is what they are. And what a think tank is basically a very well paid group of people who come up with ideas, put them together, and they come up with policies. And those policies are then lobbied in Washington. That's where your lobbyists are coming from. There's a lot of think tanks and a lot of groups like this. Um, for those who don't know what Project 2025 is, it was essentially the brainchild of the Heritage Foundation think tank, which is a conservative group, a little bit more alt right conservative, a little bit farther to the right um, than I think a lot of people would agree with on a lot of things. And this project is, well, it's huge as far as like how many pages it's taking up, and it's got a lot of stuff in here as far as um, plans and policies that would be given to the White House staff and other people within the government organization when a conservative membership or leadership took over, so that they could try to get these ideas and thoughts implemented. This happens all the time with think tanks on either side and lobbyists on either side. They're always trying to get their thoughts and their beliefs executed by people in government. Literally billions of dollars are spent into think tanks all of the time to try to get governments to do things that they think should be done. It happens on both sides. I, for one, think lobbyists should all be kicked out of DC. I think that lobbyists dilute the voice and the will of the people, especially the fact that it's all done for the most part privately. Most Americans do not have access to the information that the lobbyists are putting out there. And I say access to it as in not that it's not publicly technically available, but that it's not something that is readily available. It's not something that you're going to see in your news feeds. It's not something that you're going to actually get shipped to your house. Yeah, it exists somewhere out there on the internet, but if you don't know where to look and nobody's helping you go over the details and digest what all of the information is, it's really kind of still out of reach for most people. So it's important to have that understanding of what access to something really is and why, um, something like this, something from lobbyists is so important. How many times there's a lot of think tank groups, there's a lot of lobbyist groups. Um, I guarantee you probably have never even gone out and found any of their information. You're not out there actively every day trying to find out what all these lobbyist groups are trying to push forward. You're not going through their charts, graphs, and figures and their legislation proposals and trying to figure it all out. And you shouldn't. It's too much, honestly, and it's crazy. And I think lobbyists are obvious, honestly, just a bunch of bullshit. I think that if we can spend that much money on groups to come up with ideas, um, we could probably spend that money better. If we can spend literally hundreds of millions, billions of dollars on lobbyists, I think we could spend that money better and other things that would do much better to help our economy. Obviously, if there's that much extra money to spend on things like that, there's enough money to either put it into wages and to put more money into the economy because those people are going to spend that friggin' money. Uh, then there is, of course, the argument that if more people have more money and they're spending it into the economy, you're going to inflate the dollar, of course, again that way. it's a dumb argument, honestly. Lobbyists just they take away power of the people the way same way Citizens United did, which it takes people who have a lot more money, gives them a lot more influence in government, gives them a lot more voice in government, and takes away the influence and the will of the people. You're getting um, things that are being told to you, that you're being influenced to believe. You are not, however, um, coming up with a lot of thoughts on your own as much as you would like. You're being influenced towards certain things. So the Project 2025 Advisory Board. Obviously, this isn't everybody that's involved in it, but it's larger groups that are involved. So you got the Alabama Policy Institute, Alliance Defending Freedom, American Compass, American Conservative, America First Legal Foundation, American Accountability Foundation, American Center for Law and Justice. A lot of lawyers, a lot of judges, a lot of um, uh, people in government kind of roles or legislative kind of roles here. That if you were looking at deep state kind of thought processes, this would be kind of its own deep state, essentially. It's a lot of people in these positions that most people would associate with the deep state, just on a smaller scale, creating their own kind of chamber. So, American Moment, American Principles Project, uh, Center for Equal Opportunity, Center for Family and Human Rights, Center for Immigration Studies, Center for Renewing America. A lot of these seem innocuous, like Center for Family and Human Rights sounds good, but when you go and actually like look at what these things are, let's just type this in. I've never checked into this. Let's see. To protect immigrants, asylum seekers, and marginalized communities. Sounds good, right? Independent, nonpartisan, nonprofit organization. And this is a kind of flag for me. Not a red flag, but like a yellow flag. Whenever an organization is labeled as independent, nonpartisan, nonprofit, they will always say that when they're nonprofit. Most of the time, they are not all of that. So look into all of those things, check into all of those things. Like if we go here, Center for Human Rights and Constitutional Law, or for Family and Human Rights, Center for I saw a key thing right there. It's controversy here. And there you go. It's a right wing United States based advocacy group. See, now I had missed one word there and got a whole different result, and it was telling me that it was, this nonpartisan nonsense. And I still think that one would be probably something that's a yellow flag you want to look at, and maybe it's not quite that. Um, but then I fixed it and found, what it actually is, as because it's a different group, and it's a conservative advocacy group, which almost everybody in Project 2025 is going to be because it's obviously a conservative think tank. Focus is on social policy, lobbying, anti-abortion, which is or pro-life, say it, and then anti-LGBT, so anti-gay community. So, boom, garbage truck outside. I was like, what the hell's going on? So that's a big red flag right away. Is that you got somebody who's got an anti, any kind of group agenda, and you know right away that that's probably going to have some kind of stuff in there. And almost every one of these groups is going to have something on those lines because that's just kind of what the Heritage Foundation really is. It's got a lot of issue where it's going to say, hey, we need to cut out these sects of our population. We need to marginalize. We need to minimize these sects because if you have these different groups, they're going to take away from our group, and we need to make sure that our group still has the strength, authority, and you know the ability to discriminate essentially against all of these people one way or another. Look at this. We want you. How nice of them to want me. I don't want to be wanted. Although I want you to want me. I am from Wisconsin after all. I'm a cheap trick. The 2025 Presidential Transition Project is the conservative movement's unified effort to be ready for the next conservative administration to govern at 12 noon January. They got the date, time, everything. They're going to be out there with fucking stopwatches at the National Mall, making sure that they're ready for that inauguration so this shit can go down. One of the important lessons about the whole think tank thing is that this same group, the Heritage Group, um, they worked with President Trump last time on hiring judges and a number of other things that he absolutely did do, which is why when he said he had never heard of the Heritage organization before, and that he had no idea what their projects for 2025 was, seemed pretty disingenuous given that one, a lot of them are people he worked with prior and were in his administration last time, and belonged to the Heritage Group then and helped to get some of their policies and like not Supreme Court, but other federal judges picks, all of that. They were involved in quite a bit of things throughout his presidency and got a lot of their policies pushed then. Um, One thing you have to understand about any politician, especially Donald Trump in this, is when he says he doesn't know somebody or a group, he definitely knows somebody or that group, and it's absolutely just he knows it's not popular right now to admit to that. May never be popular to admit to that, but he absolutely does know them. He does know the policies. Anybody who's in that position, when they're going to be tied to something like that, their staff is they're gonna know about it. They're gonna be briefing them on those things. They're gonna be talking to them about whether or not they should distance themselves from those things or embrace those policies. Um, so they're always well aware of those things, and um, if they ever say they don't know those things, like you'll see people who say, okay, a lot of politicians will actually say, yeah, I know all about that stuff. My team and I have been talking about this. We absolutely are not on board with this junk. Um, I only found out about it today. I am not a fan of those ideas. I would not embrace those ideas. Most politicians will say that they've been briefed on it and they have an idea of what it is right from the get go. And if any of them ever say they don't know about that, um, they're lying because their teams, that's literally what their teams are out there to do, is to go find that information that they're being tied to, figure out what all of it is, and then brief them on that information and give them a really good knowledge of that so that they can decide their positions on those things. So never believe any politician when they say they don't know about something like that, because they definitely do. Um, it's kind of a red flag when they say they don't, because that means that they're probably recognizing that it's not popular, but that they do have some kind of inclinations towards those, but they just don't want to talk about that because it would be highly unpopular to do so. Whereas if they were to just disavow it and say, I do know about it and I think it's absolutely terrible, that's going to hurt them with other people. Just by saying that they don't understand it is easier in the long term for them to play. It's easier to spin that. Let's see. Do we really want to get into? We can look into the authors, but I don't think any of us doubt that these are all going to be conservative individuals who have ties to very conservative, um, you know, groups and organizations, and are fundamentalist in many of their respects. So I don't think we need to necessarily dive into any of these individuals whatsoever. Most of these people are going to be people that none of us really know individually by name. Um, Obviously, like Peter Navarro, some of us know about him. Uh, yeah, there's most of these guys are kind of backline people that most of us have never heard of. Of course, you've got contributors. Um, and then it's going to tell you about where other contributors are associated with individually. Again, a lot of these people are going to be people that most of us have probably never heard of individually because they're working for groups that maybe you've heard, and those groups are going to be working for other things that you may have heard at best in passing. And for the most part, I think a lot of the times when it comes to lobbyists and that kind of stuff, it's better that way. They spent a lot of time going through their credits, and only to get to a forward. 44 years ago, the United States and the conservative movement were in dire straits. Were they? 44 years ago. That was what? 1981? Oh, they're going to go back to the Reagan administration. Should have should have fucking known. That seems to be like the conservative fucking Jesus right now. I don't know when Reagan became the savior of the conservative movement. Um, Probably when he started kind of obfuscating the relationship between the conservative movement and Dixie. The old South that tried to destroy the government to take it over and create their own separate country, or to usurp the entire thing and then make all of it the South. Um, that was definitely a huge thing that worked in the conservative favor. I think a lot of people gloss over the fact that a lot of what the Conservative Party is today is definitely a huge nod to the Dixie South, and for better or worse, that they are trying to make the South rise again through policy, not through an actual takeover, which it's a much more subtle way of doing the same thing. Let's see. The country was in dire straits. Both had been betrayed. The United States and the conservative movement were betrayed by the Washington establishment and were uncertain whom to trust. Both firmly splintered and strategically adrift. We're still that moment of acute vulnerability and division. We found ourselves at that moment of acute vulnerability and division. We found ourselves besieged by existential adversaries, foreign and domestic. The late 70s were by any measure a historic low point for Americans and the political coalition dedicated to preserving its unique legacy of human flourishing and freedom. Today, America and the conservative movement are enduring an era of division and danger akin to the 1970s. Yes, disco. It's coming back. Like, what the fuck? Um, the 70s, really? America was an era of division and danger. I mean, we fought the fucking was it Vietnam in the 70s? Was I think one of our biggest fucking problems in the 70s? Drugs, I think, were an issue in the 70s, but an era of division and danger akin to the 1970s. Like, what the fuck happened in the 70s that was so fucking crazy back then that thank God Ronald Reagan came along and united us all? Uh, like, this is definitely, I think, already it's definitely showing that there's a very coloring aspect to this. It's creating a narrative and dialogue that I think a lot of people wouldn't necessarily agree with. I think even conservatives would, for the most part, agree with the fact that the 70s were not an era of division and danger that was just awful, 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 and threatened to rip our country apart. But let's see where they're going with this. Now, as then, our political class has been discredited by wholesale dishonesty and corruption. The entire political class was discredited by wholesale dishonesty. Let's see who was, um, let's see, 1970s presidents. Let's go just the presidents. Let's see, so we had Nixon, who was definitely his own fucking problem with Watergate. And then we had Ford, who came in after Nixon left. And then we went to Carter before Reagan. Carter being one of the most beloved presidents of all time. I really don't think that we're going to talk about 1981 and say that we are coming out of the 70s in an era of awful fucking government that was just discredited by dishonesty and corruption. I don't know that Carter was associated any level of corruption. 100-year-old guy who's making houses today definitely. I mean, I'm not saying that who you are today definitely was somebody who you were 50 odd years ago, but uh, let's be real. Like Nixon with Watergate was his own scandal. That was not the entire government by any means, and nobody else in there was really associated with a culture of dishonesty and corruption. It was pretty much just Nixon. It was just that one dude. Um, I don't even know was Nixon political party. I don't even know who if he was Democrat. I think he was. No, he was Republican Party. So what the fuck? Like you can't even make that a partisan thing because see now I was willing to take the hit and be like, oh no, maybe he was Democrat. Maybe I'm not thinking about it. I'd be willing to accept that maybe Nixon was a Democrat and be like, fuck that. What a dick. But he wasn't. He was a Republican. So you're talking about somebody making, government look bad. One, it was the early 70s, and it was a member of the Republican Party. So again, I don't understand where um that dichotomy comes in. But all right. Look at America under the ruling and cultural elite today. Inflation is ravaging family budgets, drug overdose deaths continue to escalate, and children suffer the toxic normalization of transgenderism with drag queens and pornography invading their school libraries. I can't tell you how many times I have been to the library when I was in school, and I would be looking through the books, and I would pull out a book to look at it, and right there, behind that book, one fucking eye looking at me, turns out some transgender drag queen back there just fucking waiting for somebody to pull that book out so she could just punch me in the face and make me feel like a woman. No, man, like this is part of my problem. Pornography invading school libraries. What fucking pornography is in libraries? Obviously not the kind most of us are thinking about, I guarantee it. The kind that they're going to be talking about if you actually go and look into some of their materials, and I have, is the kind where they're talking about books that are, talking about it's okay to be gay. Here's my gay experience or growing up trans. Here's my trans experience. And they do have stuff of a sexual nature in there. But anybody who reads that and thinks that that's even on par with some of the stuff that you will read and so many other authors in young adult books, there's a lot of stuff of that nature in those books and novels. And there should be. It's most kids' first foray into understanding that sexuality is normal and that sexuality is a part of life, for, for better or worse, and it normalizes the idea of it. I think it's important that we normalize the idea of it. We see this around the world where other cultures normalize sexuality in everyday things. Um, you can watch television in some European countries, and there's boobs on the TV, and it's not that big a fucking deal because it's normalized. Nobody's going, you know, somehow America had this sexual revolution in like the 60s and 70s where it started becoming more and more normal to like be able to see nipples behind a shirt, and it was nipples behind a shirt. You still can't see the nipples, but it is what it is. Somebody was comfortable, you could see their nippies, and it was fine. The whole sexual revolution I think was great because it normalized something that needed to be normalized. Is that people did have sex, people enjoyed sex, and that was all right. And somehow we became so much more prudish. Somehow we spent 50 years regressing on the whole sexual frontier. Porn is fucking everywhere, but we're way more prudish now than we used to be, except for when we're in the privacy and on our phones or something. And that kind of boggles my mind that we did that. But absolutely, you're not seeing actual pornography in school, and there's not drag queens like waiting like ninjas in the fucking air ducts for kids to come into school and look for books and be like, okay, the librarian is not looking. Um, Shit, hey, you need to jump down. You know, Blue James, hop in over here. We're gonna transition this kid today. That's not happening. There's not drag queens. I don't know what drag queen names are. I got no fucking idea. Uh, but they're not waiting in the wings to fucking bungee jump down from the ceiling or something, and kidnap your kid and turn them into somebody who's like, I don't know, mom. I went to the library to look up some shit, and I think I think I'm transgender now. You know, it just happened. Yeah, this is such a stupid fucking line to even see in any kind of written document. Just wild. Overseas, a totalitarian communist dictatorship in Beijing is engaged in strategic, cultural, and economic Cold War against America's interests, values, and people. Um, I think we're missing a major communist dictatorship. Um, what about Russia? Russia has definitely been operating against America's interests, values, and people. It's weird to me to see people mentioning China as a communist country that's against America and not mentioning the major statehood that was always the threat. I mean, the fucking Cold War was not against China. The Cold War was against Russia. The Cuban Missile Crisis was not something to do with China. That was to deal with Russia. Russia has been operating against America in the most obvious fucking facets forever. And suddenly, somewhere, and conservatives, fucking help me out if you can. When did the Conservative Party just decide to stop mentioning that Russia is a communist fucking dictatorship operating against America? When did this happen? When did we stop talking about Russia being a fucking problem and admitting that Russia is trying to interfere in our government, trying to interfere in our elections, trying to spy on us, trying to fucking create agents here? We know Russia paid fucking people that were influencers through screen companies to promote. It specifically gave them fucking Russian talking points to promote in our government to influence how they were talking about our politics. They paid people millions of fucking dollars, influencers, just average fucking influencers in the conservative fucking atmosphere, echo chambers, to fucking spout this Russian bullshit that favored Russia's views and favored the way people looked at Russia, and to promote conservative views through Russian propaganda. And somehow that's not on everybody's fucking like holy shit list. That should be insane. And to see like this, where we're talking about communist, the communist dictatorship in Beijing is engaged Russia. we While we do have some stuff from China, nowhere near the amount of stuff that Russia is doing every fucking day. And we are seeing it. We have evidence of it. We can prove all of this. But we're not going to talk about that. When did the Conservative Party become Russian apologists? Or people who just didn't want to fucking acknowledge that Russia is still one of our main enemies on the world stage? Is China our best friend? Fuck no. But they are nowhere near the same level as Russia, and they are certainly not interested in getting into a major war with the US. It wouldn't help either one of us to any end. But Russia, what the fuck? When did we start on the conservative side liking Russia? That's insane, man. If you guys know, if you guys can tell me when conservatives started apologizing for Russia or endorsing Russia or ignoring that Russia exists and all the things it's doing are just suddenly okay, um, let me know, man, because it's blowing my mind. It's killing me. All while globalist elites in Washington awaken only slowly to that growing threat. Moreover, low income communities are drowning in addiction and government dependent and temporary elites. Low income communities are drowning. The lowest income communities are in red states. You have low income areas in large cities, you will always have that. But by and large, the vast majority of low income communities are your rural areas, and the vast majority of the poorest rural areas are all red state. And most of their um, government dependence is monies that are paid to the federal government from blue states like California and New York, who subsidize a huge amount of the government assistance to the poor throughout the entire country. Because their domestic product for the state, their GDP for the state, is just huge because they make a shitload of money in those states, and they pay more taxes, and therefore more people in other states that are poor or have negative GDPs. A lot of red states again have negative GDPs. Um, that's where their money comes from for all of this. That's where their money comes from for highways. So it's important to, I think, understand that's a thing. Let's see. Contemporary elites have even repurposed the worst ingredients of the 1970s radical chic to build the totalitarian cult known today as the Great Awakening. I never even heard the Great Awakening, so I don't think it can be that great. And now, as then, the Republican Party seems to have little understanding about what to do. Most alarming of all, the very moral foundations of our society are in peril. I don't think our moral foundations are in peril at all. I do think we are at a time where philosophically a lot of people are debating whose morals are right and whose morals are wrong. And there's this juxtaposition that just because somebody has a different moral standard or a different premise for their morals, or the premise for their morals, that other people's morals are thus invalidated and inherently wrong, or because people who are good people live lifestyles that we don't agree with, or are worshiping religions that maybe we don't agree with, that they're inherently wrong or immoral. I don't think that's true at all. I think this is an alarming way to state things, saying that people are suddenly immoral just because we have disagreements on their sources for morality or how we live our lifestyle. Um, that means that your perspectives on how people should live are more important than their freedoms to choose how they live themselves. America is a free nation. Uh, we are one free of religious oppression, and that needs to be something that we. Medicine time. I'll take my medicine after I'm done with this. Thank you for reminding me. Um, but yeah, it's important that we acknowledge that we're a free society and that somebody's individual morality does not necessarily have any premise to guide how everybody else should live their life. Freedom is very real, very important. It is the core of American society, and it takes precedence over your individual ideologies of how somebody should live and how or what makes them moral. That's philosophical. That is not something that has any real grounds to dictate how people live their lives or how legal policies on a federal level should be made. Right? So that's part of the Constitution. Yet students of history will note that, notwithstanding all those challenges to the late 1970s, proved to be the moment when the political right unified itself and the country and itself and the country and led the United States to historic political, economic, and global victories. The late 1970s, when the moment with the political right, that was Carter a Republican? No, the late 1970s would be Mr. Carter. Mr. Carter was was a Democrat, so I'm not sure how they can say the late 70s were the moment the political right united itself in the country and led the United States to, because the late 1970s, let me see, 1970s um, Congress, um, congressional seats, maybe. 1970 became mostly, yeah, it was mostly Democrat at that time. That time, it just gave me 1970 itself. 1974. It became even more democratic than republic. So yeah, like so the evidence is saying, that this was felt that was being run by a Democratic majority at the time. So I'm not quite sure how, if the Democrats were the ones in power, it was the uh, conservative party who united itself and the country and led the United States to political, economic, and global victories when they were not the majority in power. They didn't control the House. Did they control the Senate? Like 1978 Senate elections, maybe? Feel like here with no election. I want to see the game. I want to see, you know, before the election. So 58-41. So again, you're looking at a Democratic majority. So yeah, I don't understand where they're coming up with this Heritage Foundation claim that it was the Republican or conservative movement that had all these victories and started making our country greater. At that time, it was predominantly Democratic in our government. Yeah, so that I don't know, that's weird. That's after Jim Crow Dixiecrats, man. That's back before the Democrats in those areas were still technically conservative. Um, or conservative leaders who later moved over to the Republican Party when the South really switched their seats because of the Jim Crow narratives. For those who don't know, it was in about the '60s when uh, the South went from being Democratic conservatives to Republican conservatives. It's the same people, the same concepts. They just moved out of the Democratic Party into the Republican Party because the Republican Party endorsed a lot of their more, for better or worse, some of the racist narratives that were still populist in those areas in the South. Um, and that's kind of where the South became more Republican and less Democrat. So you can hate the old Democrats because that's who they were, but you have to acknowledge at the same time that that party, those people and those ideologies were carried into the Republican Party, and that's who a lot of the Southern Republicans are today. So if you're going to hate Democrats for that shit, then you have to recognize that these people just put on a different fucking team jersey, and that's who they are now. You can't blame this people for something, and when they were like, hold on, we don't want these fucking people on our team anymore. We got, they got ejected, or they left because they didn't agree with the way things were going. Suddenly, that they went and took all those problems and joined the other team and put those problems into that team. That team was like, cool, it's popular here, so we'll work with that. Um, you have to still, if you're mad at those ideas and those problems, you have to be mad at those people who are still executing those problems and ideas on the other team. You, you can't just keep still harboring it against the one team who's no longer fucking carrying that problem, right? We have our own fucking problems today that we very much need to acknowledge and deal with. But you can't carry that old prejudice and still hold it against the people who are now on the other team and executing it there. Make sense? Well, hopefully. Um, you know, just goofy stuff. Um, so yeah, if somebody's gonna get to have, if we're saying that the late '70s were a time where the country had historic political, economic, and global victories, and it was majority led Democrats. They held the presidency. They were in control of the House, and they were in control of the Senate. Um, that suggests that any great victories and accomplishments done during that time would then logically be owed to the Democrats and not the conservatives. Reagan took over in what 81. So I think at that point you would have to acknowledge that it didn't start until the early '80s. If that's where you were going with that, maybe they just got the fucking date wrong. I don't know. I don't know. Seems like an important thing when you're talking about major legislation and you're going to put, you know, 700 pages or 900 pages together. that you would want to get something as simple as those years. Oh, this is why. This is why I see. The Heritage Foundation is proud to have played a small but pivotal role in that story. It was the early 1979 amid stagflation, gas lines, and the Red Army's invasion of Afghanistan, the nadir of Jimmy Carter's days of malaise. That, yes, Jimmy Carter is to blame for Russia invading Afghanistan. They weren't even going to do it. And Jimmy was like, bitch, bad pussies. And they were like, oh, fine, Jimmy, fine. We're doing this thing. All because of Jimmy Carter. I don't think the conservatives can get their fucking a lot of them they can't get their fucking position figured out on whether or not they want war or don't want war. If a president is to blame for other countries starting war, if a president has nothing to do with other countries starting wars, it's always the president's fault. If it's a Democrat, it's never the president's fault if it's a conservative. It's such a fucking stupid fucking situation. Other countries are going to start wars when other countries want to start wars. It has almost nothing to do with who is the American president. They don't give a shit who the American president is. Because they know in the end it has to go through our entire government, and it has to be something that the people are going to be behind before America will ever get fucking involved. Because if America gets involved, it's going to be soldiers, and if it's a big enough fucking conflict, America's not going to want to get involved because it doesn't want to do another world war. So it's a very cat and mouse game. It has absolutely dick to do with a president. It doesn't matter what party they're in. They know exactly how that game is played. People in government, in the Pentagon, they all know how the game is played. The only people who seem to not understand how that game is played are the voters who are very, very misinformed or uninformed on those issues. Um, you can choose to continue to be uninformed on those issues, but I'm telling you right now, if you think the American president is any reason why any country is invading or not invading, you're an absolute idiot. Absolute idiot. The American president at the time has absolutely nothing to do with that. Period. So yeah, they're saying that in the 1979 they played a small but pivotal role. What is that role? Are they going to tell us? Let's see. That Heritage launched the Mandate for Leadership project. We brought together hundreds of conservative scholars and academics across the conservative movement. They created a 20-volume, 3,000-page governing handbook. Ooh, makes this one look tiny. 20 volumes, 3,000-page handbook containing more than 2,000 conservative policies to reform the federal government and rescue the American people from Washington dysfunction. It was a promise from the conservative movement to the country, confident, specific, and clear. The words were confident. I get it. Maybe arrogant, and another similar word. Mandate for Leadership was published in January 1981. So they took credit for the late 70s when the Democrats were running everything, but for something that they didn't even publish until 1981. That same month that Ronald Reagan was sworn into his presidency. So they didn't even have anything to do with him being elected, at least not so far as their Mandate for Leadership book was involved. By the end of that year, more than 60% of its recommendations had become policy. So once again, talking about the Heritage Foundation is just a think tank, and it's not something that the these conservative leaders would do. Right from their own fucking book, they're talking about how the conservative leadership executed more than 60% of its recommendations in their very first major project. Um, so if you want to give Reagan credit for things, maybe these guys. But if you want to blame Reagan for things, also probably these guys. Um, the idea that Reagan had these economic policies, I would say it's probably these dudes, given that it's also in Project 2025, from what I understand, to greatly reduce taxes on businesses. So weird that these people who are very, very wealthy and who are beholden to people who are very, very wealthy, who are giving them all this money to do these things, think that the one of the key elements to making our economy better is to reduce taxes on the most wealthy people in our country. These, and I'm not talking about you normal like little seven figure, 8 figure millionaires. We're talking about the people who are very very high wealthy people who are running these very very big companies. Um, and we are neglecting the fact that we were at a place in America where a lot of our infrastructure was great. Things were taken care of, buildings were being built, big business buildings were being built. Companies were still actually able to do all of that stuff. Companies were not suffering at fucking all during this time period. Before this, they were doing just absolutely just fine, and our infrastructure was great and great health. And ever since then, our infrastructure has been steadily decaying. We have not seen many new big businesses being built. Your average main street and across the country has just been absolutely getting the shit kicked out of it constantly because it's hard to compete when the playing field is not level, and that's been something since this time period here. So if you want to look at maybe at a source for some of these problems, maybe this is the source. I'm actually really glad right now that I'm reading this because I'm seeing some things that I was not aware of, and that's big fucking flags, man. Big fucking flags. I'm not gonna go too many pages into this today. We'll go a couple pages at a go. It's gonna take a while. If anybody has a page that they want to look at or an excerpt that they saw that they want to talk about, we can try and find those, and then we'll come back at any point. All right. So, Mandate for Leadership was published in the 80s. Got 60% of its recommendations becoming policy, and Reagan was on his way to ending stagflation, reviving American confidence and prosperity, and winning the Cold War, which I think really anybody would have won, especially when he just said we need to tear down a wall, and a bunch of fucking people just went and tore down the goddamn wall. One of his greatest accomplishments was literally just fucking misspeaking and people taking it out of context and just doing it on their own in their own country. I think we need to give the people who decided to just take him at his word and just fucking do it. I think we need to give those German people some huge credit for that. Um, and ending the Cold War, man. The Cold War really didn't end. It transformed. It became far more subtle, but yeah, it didn't really end, unfortunately. Um, the Soviet Union broke up. At a, when did the USSR break up? Goddamn, I was still a kid when the USSR broke up. It did exist when I was a kid. 1991. So yeah, the USSR was still there until 91. That's crazy. I was 11 years old when the USSR fucking dissolved and became Russia. So yeah, it's not like it's that far in our past. That's 30 years ago, and obviously you can very much see today that Russia is still trying to reestablish the USSR and regain those territories. That's exactly what's going on with Ukraine. Russia itself just it doesn't have the access to the waterways and everything else that it needs for strengthening the global trade and the resources, the raw materials, and it really wants to reestablish it just for military might and for land mass. So it's not going to stop with Ukraine. It didn't stop with Georgia. It's not going to stop at any point. Anybody who thinks it will, and that we should just hand over Ukraine or anything else is an absolute fucking tool. And that you're not smart. If you think that Russia is just going to stop at Ukraine or be happy with just a portion of Ukraine, um, or that Putin's at some point going to die and the next person in line isn't going to do the same goddamn thing, you're an idiot. You're an absolute idiot. You just don't understand the policies and the politics over there. You don't understand the ultimate goal of these people. You don't pay attention to world history. Um, these people are not going to stop at any point. They want the entire thing back. They need to be defeated, and they need to be defeated by the people over there. That's why we are giving the tools to the people over there to do the defeating. Meanwhile, as we're selling these materials to them, we are creating more jobs in America to continue to create munitions, um, to backpile our armory and restock all of that. So we are making money on this war. We're keeping trade routes available to this war, and we are going to be creating a huge trade ally in the future that will definitely help our economics in the future. Once the war is over and Ukraine is, if it still has agency, it's going to be huge for us. I believe at this point we stand to still have that. Um, doesn't I don't know. I think Trump is going to fuck that up, and I don't know if we can give Ukraine enough of an advantage in the time being. I'm hoping that some of our other allies will take up that mantle and do whatever is necessary to help protect Ukraine and its agency once Trump tries to give that over, just like he's trying to give um, the Palestine back to Israel and allow Israel to kill everybody in Palestine, whether they're Hamas or not. The vast majority are not. A lot of people don't fucking understand that the vast majority of Palestinians are not fucking Hamas and do not like Hamas because they don't fucking pay attention to anything other than some very small tidbits that Fox News puts out, and they are being very fucking generous towards how they are illustrating things to say that Israel's cool with killing everybody and it's all okay because all of Palestine is terrorist. Because every Muslim is a fucking terrorist, right? You fucking idiots. I served with Muslims. I served with people from all over the world that were Muslim. They were not all from the Middle East. Muslims are from all over the goddamn world. We have millions of Muslim Americans right here in our very country, and they are some of the nicest, most respectful fucking people I have ever met. And they were absolutely cool with who I was as a person. They never judged me for, drinking soda or beer or anything else. If they did, they kept it to themselves, and they were still cool with me whenever we hung out. So um, they they got down in the trenches. They fought alongside everybody else that was out there in the trenches. Some of them died in the trenches fighting for America, and killing people in those Middle Eastern countries who were also Muslim. Because when it comes to religion, you're not talking about fighting wars for that kind of stuff right now. And even back in the day, Christians killed plenty of Christians for their own gains and more, be it most of the time political nature. So let's not pretend that that's anything. Let's see. Bad news today is that our political establishment and cultural elite have once again driven America toward decline. Okay, the good news is that we know the way out, even though the challenges today are not what they were in the 70s. Conservatives should be confident that we can rescue our kids, reclaim our culture, revive our economy, and defeat the anti American left. Really, the anti American left. They must be way more left than I am because I am very much pro American. Unless there's a whole anti American left party that we don't know about, we'll have to get a hold of my Democrat friends. We're going to find out who these anti American left people are and we'll get rid of them. Don't you worry. We'll take care of that shit. We will have our assassin ninja drag queens line in wait in public schools to take care of the anti-American. Fucking dumb. And having different political ideologies does not make somebody anti-American. What makes somebody anti-American is saying that you don't approve of things in the Constitution, like freedom of religion, freedom of speech, um, you know, freedom of oppression, and that people need to absolutely live their lives the way that you think that they should live um, for your approval. Otherwise, they're anti-American and immoral people. That would be anti-American. Um, oh man, that's crazy to call an entire group of people and anti-American just because they're on the other side. If you're letting here should be a major red flag for everybody out there. If you're listening to people, if you're following somebody and they're telling you that the only way that anybody who doesn't agree with you is just right away just anti-American. If somebody's telling you this, that person is just trying to sell you shit. That person is absolutely a bad faith actor, man. They have had no interest in promoting themselves for how great they are. They're absolutely just trying to sell you on how terrible somebody else is because they don't agree with you and whatever this person is trying to sell you. So that should be a major red flag. As Ronald Reagan put it, freedom is a fragile thing, and it's never more than one generation away from extinction. It's not it's not ours by way of inheritance. It must be fought for and defended constantly by each generation. I'm wondering what this notation is. Maybe they're perioding it before you the end of the actual quote itself. I would not disagree with Reagan that freedom is a fragile thing and it's never more than one generation away from extinction. I think that's very accurate. I don't know if this was originally him that said this. Um, it sounds like something much, much older, to be honest with you. Um, everybody, for the most part, him, 1960. Maybe it was him. Maybe it was actually in the mandate for leadership. I feel like he read something similar to this. I swear to God, it's sticking in my brain. And I've heard this before. So maybe it's Reagan, maybe it wasn't. um, and freedom is not ours by way of inheritance, must be fought for and defeated or defended constantly by each generation. I would definitely agree with that. I think it's up to everybody to always defend freedom in all regards. Um, the the idea that we need to defend freedom by oppressing others, though, that I would definitely disagree with that. Um, if your idea of freedom means that everybody has to live life by your standards, by your morals, by your philosophies, that's not freedom. That's actually oppression. And one of the key elements of our Constitution guarantees that people don't have the right to oppress people or force people to live by the beliefs of others. That's what makes America so great is that we can disagree on things. We can absolutely have differences in how we think people should live, and that's okay. But we do not have the authority or the wherewithal um, to oppress others and to force. So that is not defending freedom. Um, you're not defending freedom if you're trying to take it from other people. If you're trying to take away lifestyles and choices from other people. That's absolutely oppression. That is dictatorial. That is um, the antithesis of a free nation. That is the antithesis of what America stands for. So this is the duty history has put before us, and the standard by which our generation of conservatives will be judged. We should not want it any other way. The legacy of Mandate for Leadership, the Heritage Foundation first book, or apparently fucking small encyclopedia set, and indeed of the entire Reagan Revolution. The Reagan Revolution, holy shit, dude. He had 8 years in office. It was not a revolution. There was almost no revolutionary fucking things other than him slashing the shit out of taxes for really rich people. Uh, if anybody can give me more information what they think was a revolutionary fucking thing that Reagan did, by all means, let me know. But I think we're giving Mr. Reagan far too much fucking credit, and obviously a celebrity that was easily manipulated by a think tank, which is what it sounds like more than anything. Is that if conservatives want to save the country, we need a bold and courageous plan. This book is the first step in that plan. Moving forward, the conservative promise. This volume, the conservative promise, is the open. This volume, the conservative promise, is the opening salvo of the 2025 presidential transition project launched by the Heritage Foundation and our many partners in April 2022. Its 30 chapters lay out hundreds of clear and concrete policy recommendations for White House offices, cabinet departments, Congress, and agencies, commissions, and boards. Um, so pretty much every fucking facet of government for the most part. Just as important as the scope of the conservative promises recommendations is the breadth of its authorship. The book is the product of more than 400 scholars and policy experts from across the conservative movement and around the country. Contributors include former elected officials, while world-renowned economists, and veterans from 4 presidential administrations. This is an agenda prepared by and for conservatives who will be ready on day one of the next administration to save our country from the brink of disaster. Again, if anybody's kind of just trying to bring you this alarmist nature, if they're trying to constantly tell you to be terrified of the way things are or the way things are going to be, that it's going to be World War III, that it's going to be disaster, that should be an immediate red flag for you. It's so much easier to sell people things when you make them terrified of what the alternatives might be. It's dishonest, it's disingenuous, and they're absolutely looking to just make you feel like the only way you can feel safe again is if you buy their product. So that should be a big red flag for anybody who's reading something like this or watching something like this on TV. If at any point, even I'll, when people told me that Trump was going to be the guy who starts World War III, because I was like, why? Um, just because somebody tells me that somebody's going to be this disaster, this terrible thing, that immediately makes me go, I don't think I want to trust whoever this is. Now, Trump may start World War III. Any fucking president may start World War III, but no president in my fucking recollection started a world war. Other countries started giant fucking wars. And we ended up going into them, and it became a world war because we had to get our allies involved to fucking overcome true evil, these majorly evil things that were going on throughout the world. That's when we get into these big wars. Um, but that's not a disaster. That is us protecting the world from major evils doing majorly evil things. And we need to want to be a little bit smarter about this. But anytime somebody's trying to tell us fear and salvation, that's very that's very Baptist preacher of them. Um, the Baptist preachers are famous for selling fire and brimstone and then promising you salvation if you go to their church and donate past the collection plate, my friend. That's essentially what this is. The Heritage Foundation is once again facilitating this work, but as our dozens of partners and hundreds of authors will attest, this book is the work of the entire conservative movement. As such, the authors express consensus recommendations already forged, especially along four broad fronts that will decide America's future. Fronts being listed here are restore the family as the centerpiece of American life and protect our children. The family has always been a portion of the American life. We've always protected children. I think that's one thing that culturally we just all agree on, no matter what cultures have come into America. Um, we've always tried to take care of our families and our societies, our groups, neighborhoods. We've always done that. Um, as far as the American family, we always protected families. We always believed in families, but we have never believed that people who are single are necessarily any less than. I don't know that that's what the insinuation there is, but I definitely think that as people decide to be um, a new generation that doesn't necessarily have as many families, it's okay. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I think we need to, um, as much as we want to restore the idea of family, I think it's still imperative that we restore the idea of individualism and the strength of the individual. A lot of our most successful fucking people in our country were single people who were able to do great things because they didn't have other things in their lives that pulled them away from the dreams and goals that they had. They were able to do great things because of that. Some people can do great things even with family. Some people need that not have those distractions. And however people can achieve those things, I think it's great either way. I don't think having a family makes you a better person or a worse person. People are just people. Cool. Number two, dismantle the administrative state and return self-governance to the American people. This is, I think they're talking about basically the government having too much control over things and returning self-governance to the people. I think it's kind of a misnomer because you have to have a certain level of governance in any society to maintain the control of the society in respect to preventing basically chaos and anarchy. You can only give so much control to the people. One of the things that the federal government does is it protects freedoms and individual rights. That's the vast majority of its regulations is to guarantee freedoms and the few punitive actions that exist on the federal level are basically to punish people who have done things who have infringed on the rights of others. The vast majority of the federal government is there to protect the American people and to protect their rights and their sovereignty. So when they say dismantle the administrative state and return self-governance to the American people, this to me is a little bit too close to a subtle anarchy. Uh, you know, saying that people would do a better job of governing themselves than the government ever could. Well, people had that opportunity in the beginning. A lot of these legislations and rules weren't there necessarily in the beginning. A lot of these protections weren't there in the beginning, and a lot of these companies and states decided to do things that were obviously horrible, taking advantage of people, kind of creating sweatshops and their own versions of slave labor forces, and that's why we had to create these agencies and these legislations to prevent that sort of thing from happening. So the idea of dismantling all of that and saying, we can trust people to do the right thing. I think you can honestly trust most people to do the right thing, but most of the people in power, unfortunately, uh, that becomes a lot harder to do to trust those people because historically they have proven that with power, with money, comes more greed, comes less ambition to do the right thing for the right reasons, and the absolute desire to exploit people to have greater profits and greater power is something that we need to put in check. That's why our forefathers they saw this already. That's why they created a system of checks and balances with the living constitution that could be amended so that we can continue to create a better system as society and culture change so that we can continue to protect everybody and have those checks and balances in power to prevent people's freedoms from being tread upon and from people to abusing their positions. On defending our nation's sovereignty, borders, and bounty against global threats. Um, I think that's obvious. I think most people would agree with that one. Secure our God given individual rights to live freely, what our Constitution calls the blessings of liberty. Again, I think everybody would agree with that one. I don't think everybody necessarily agrees, um, you know, who, the God in question might be, but I do think that everybody understands that we have God given individual rights to live freely. I would add to that means, again, we cannot oppress the rights and freedoms of individuals who do not share our personal morals or our ways of life. Um, a lot of people want to utilize this to infringe on other people's liberties because they don't agree with how they live their lives, and that needs to be none of this nonsense about, well, I have friends who are gay and I don't have a problem with them. Well, if you're working actively against legislation that interferes with their ability to live their life freely and to be happy and experience life to the fullest, then you do have a problem with it. You just don't want to have to, take on the moral and ethical fucking conversation that comes with dealing with the fact that you're literally enacting policies and legislation and philosophies that tear down those people and degrade those people and make it impossible for them to live life completely free and completely fair. So let's have that conversation another, shall we? All right, we're just going to finish up page 3 today, then we'll go into the page 4 tomorrow. What makes these 4 pieces of the conservative promise so valuable is to the next president is that they cut through superficial distractions and focus on the moral foundational challenges America faces in the moment of history. This was one of the secrets of conservative success in the Reagan era. Our generation should emulate. Focus on the moral and foundational challenges America faces. That was that Reagan's thing? I was a baby during this time. So I guess, I don't know all of what was going on with the Reagan years. If somebody could illustrate for me this, I would be more than happy to understand that. Please give me sources and not just anecdotes or repeated bits of, I want to know, a lot of the details of that legislation, policy, the actions taken in court. As in the late 70s, once again, a Democratic controlled government and country. Americans today experience the failure of political and cultural elites in countless ways. During a time when we were at peace, the only war was the Cold War, which was the Russian-led fucking thing from way back in the 60s and 50s. Ever since basically the World Wars. So really not anything that was a political thing. And cultural elites. The failures of political and cultural elites in countless ways. What ways are those? In the job market and in the grocery store. Well, the job market and the grocery store are where they're at because of COVID. Everything fell apart. We went to a more gig driven economy because a lot of people realized that they could start gigs and start doing things on their own, be their own man, make more money that way, which is actually great. That's kind of the American dream, is to have more people kind of doing their own thing, finding their own way, living their dream, and maybe making a success story out of themselves. Uh, we don't want the American ideology economically isn't that everybody just falls in line and becomes a worker. That is a industry-led fallacy because it benefits them if everybody doesn't try to compete or take a corner of a market and everybody just jumps onto a fucking factory line and takes what you're willing to give them and you make all of the you make the bulk of the profit and you have the bulk of the control within the economy. If everybody's kind of doing their own thing and you're struggling to find workers, once again, workers are a commodity, so supply and demand. If there's less workers in the field, you have to pay them more to get them into the door and to keep them in the door. So you have to acknowledge that when you're talking about it. And of course, the payments at the grocery store checkout. People raised their prices during COVID because of supply issues that they were having. They had to pay higher costs some of the time, or some of them were just being exploitative and raising the prices. And unfortunately, uh, we didn't have people at the time who were willing to put checks and balances on that. They still have not put effective checks and balances on that. And because we're in a free capitalist system, unfortunately, our government only has so much um, authority over prices. It has to create legislation, and it has to be bipartisan legislation that has to be approved by everybody to really get it implemented. But yeah, these companies, once the prices went back down for their supply, they absolutely could have lowered their costs, and that would not have been deflation. But they chose to keep it high because they could keep their stocks much higher. They propped their stock dividends with that, kept increasing their profit margins that way, and they did a shitload of stock buybacks with those profits, which of course count against their revenue, lowering their overall revenue, but giving their companies way more power and control of their facilities. Plus, they get to own more stocks. If you own stocks, you can take out loans against the valuations of those stocks and spend the money without actually liquidating the stock assets. So you can maintain control of your company, have billions of dollars in stocks, and take out millions of dollars in loans, spend only a portion of it, and the interest that you have on the money that's still in a bank in a savings account is going to pay off the interest rate on your loan and then some. So you're actually making money on borrowing. And all the time, you're never having to liquidate a single stock. It's a fucked up system. And unfortunately, these wealthy people are able to fucking these oligarchical companies are able to exploit that system because I really don't know why there's really no checks and fucking balances on this. It's a gambling system that's heavily rigged to their favor that allows them to spend what they're gambling on right now, even though they're not giving up their fucking chips at the table. They're not having to cash in their chips to get their money. It's kind of wild that way. And you know, nobody else can do this. Your average Joe is not going to be able to take out a loan against his fucking 500 stock or some shit. And bumfuck companies, even if it's got a decent value to it. It's absolutely wild that these companies can do this, but they absolutely can. They do, and they do it all the time. And that's exactly what they did with the exorbitant price gouging that they've been doing at the grocery store, at the retail. So let's not pretend that this the politicians' fault. This is absolutely the fucking elite's fault. And these elites are not just fucking. They're not all Democrats. They're not even a majority Democrats. A lot of these people are conservatives. They are actually part of the people who funded Project 2025 and spent a shitload of money to get, uh, you know, Donald Trump elected. So we have to be a little bit more intelligent in how we're looking at this shit, and to be a bit more genuine in how we're illustrating these points on the streets and in our schools. Um, Political and cultural elites are failing in our on our streets and in our schools. Yeah, they need to be in our libraries protecting us from the ninja drag queens who are trying to give us the pornography in our schools. I think if we had a politician at every fucking library entrance and exit, we could probably protect ourselves from them so much better. It's, um, I'm assuming with the schools they're talking about CRT and DEI, which are just fucking. Um, the one, DEI is not in our schools, and two, CRT is not in our fucking schools. Um, People don't even fucking understand what it is, and they're trying to fucking argue against it all the time. They get the basic concepts fed to them of what it is. They have a bare minimum understanding of what it is, and then they just follow this narrative that it's all being forced down our children's throats in our schools, and it's not even in the fucking schools in the classrooms. It's not in the media and within our institutions. Um, how is the politicians and the cultural elites failing us in the media with their institutions? Are you talking about Alex Jones, Joe Rogan, Steve Bannon? Um, like who in our media is failing us? Um, you have freedom of speech, you have freedom of the press. People can tune into whatever fucking station they want. I do agree that the media is absolutely failing because actual truth is not getting out there anywhere near that it should. Media in general is just either echo chambers, repeating things that people want to hear, no matter how fucking false it is, or they're just spending all the time bashing people on whatever end of the spectrum, versus actually informing people of any kind of truth or validity. In fact, they're not backing things up, and they're trying way too hard to color things to support specific narratives. I would give you that, but I would say that we need to acknowledge that that's not a partisan issue. That's on every single aspect of media. That is in every form of media right now. And I think the real solution to that is to remove any kind of political bend from media and to incentivize people not to have echo chambers and to punish people for not faithfully representing truth. Um, I hope most people would agree with that. But in truth, these daily dysfunctions are not innumerable problems, but innumerable manifestations of acute core crises. In 79, the threats we face for the Soviet Union, the socialism of 1970s liberals. But so we're gonna just always say socialism is a liberal thing and not a okay. It's a communist thing, which is it's a different system of governance. But we do have, of course, socialist bends to some of our programs, but that's societally. You will always have some societal programs that have a socialist nature. That's kind of where the word socialism comes from, is that you have programs that are created to further the society over the individual few, because we recognize that you have to do that to some degree to have a healthy and productive culture. For instance, your sewage treatment facilities, your water facilities, those are all like socialist programs. Your police departments, those are socialist programs. Your roadways, your highways, those are socialist type programs. Um, so only things socialist, um, but not really predicating the need for those individual programs to be socialist based, I think is kind of stupid and disingenuous. And it's more about creating a label that you can hate versus being honest about what the thing is. Socialism of the 1970s liberals. I would have to have more details about what they're angry about in that aspect. Uh, the predatory deviancy of cultural elites. I would say that's just anybody who's an elite, period. I don't think it has to be cultural. I think we're fucking lying our asses off if we think that any kind of elite doesn't have predatory deviancy and that it has to be an elite on a much larger scale. Even elites within small towns have a degree of predatory deviancy that they hide or share with other elites within their small communities. You will always see that. It is a problem of society that we have had forever. People with any measure of power will always try to get away with shit. It just is what it is. Um, how do we fix that? I don't know. Um, More accountability, more transparency, I think would be a key to that. Um, but how do we affect that without infringing on freedom? That's a problem. Reagan defeated these beasts by ignoring their tentacles and striking instead at their hearts. Reagan fought the Kraken and apparently did even better than Captain Jack Sparrow, which I find hard to believe. Jack Sparrow was a fucking rock star. Reagan was just an old dude who wasn't even that great of an actor. His approach to the Cold War, we win and they lose. Yep, that was all Reagan. Had nothing to do with anybody else. Didn't have to do with our military or our Pentagon or all the intelligence agencies that were involved in it and had been for a long, long time. Reagan didn't just happen to be the successor of things that were already well in the works. It was all him. He fucking grabbed up a sword, stood on the edge of that ship, and fought a Kraken and kicked its ass. Like, take that, you commies. We win, you lose. All Reagan. His economic agenda, the human dignity awoke in its many rewards. What? No, the human dignity awoke in its many rewards. That was his economic plan. It had absolutely nothing to do with the fact that he gouged taxes. Um, yeah, he cut taxes massively for the rich from like was it 60% or 70% like that at the time. He cut them down like 20% or something like that. It was a massive, massive tax. Did it pay down to the average person? The average person did not see a pay increase. They did not see benefits to a lot of them. We can get more into that at another point and look at how much things cost from one time to another and whether or not those were congruent with um, these massive tax cuts that these businesses had. And you will see their stock performances probably dramatically increase because of that. I think we would see some of the first massive buybacks during that period if you wanted to look at that as well. Um, his platform in the culture wars, the community of values embodied in these words: family, work, neighborhood, peace, and freedom. Yes, because no other president was about those things. They never talked about family, work, neighborhoods, peace, and freedom. Every other president was like, fuck family, fuck friends, fuck freedom. We don't need peace. Let's get to war. We're going to destroy this neighborhood. Absolutely. This is all starting with Reagan. Thank God he's the second Jesus. This book and Project 2025 as a whole will arm the next conservative president with the same kind of strategic clarity, but for a new age. So, that's where we're going to start and leave off for today. We went through enough things to really kind of get an idea of how they're coloring things, the narrative that they want to set and take, um, who's sponsoring this, kind of what their ultimate goal is, and they're already claiming that they've existed since the late 70s, early 80s when they actually published their first book, Reagan, and got 60% of their policies in that series of fucking encyclopedias were passed through the Reagan administration, which should be kind of alarming for people because it looks like they're looking at celebrity people who don't know enough about politics to get a furtherance for their agendas. Um, and while some of these agendas are colored a specific way to make it look very cheery, a lot of it is impressive. Really is crushing freedoms for a lot of people and taking away rights from a lot of people. So going forward, keep that in mind. We will visit this more. Hopefully tomorrow I will be able to look more. So Project 2025, we're getting it started. We're gonna go through these pages. We're gonna tear out the beast a little bit.